He was ordered to stay at his post, but when Sergeant Dan Williams heard that sound cutting through the sandstorm, a desperate whimper that shouldn't exist in the middle of nowhere, he made a choice that would change everything. What he found wasn't enemy movement. It was a dying German shepherd, shielding 3 newborn puppies with her last breath. No tags, no owner, no reason to be alive, but somehow they were. And in the next few minutes, you'll discover how one Marine's decision to break protocol didn't just save 4 lives. It revealed a miracle that will shatter your heart and rebuild your faith. The Coahuilan Desert doesn't forgive. It takes, it buries, it erases. But on this night, as Sergeant Dan Williams stood watch through a sandstorm that could strip paint from metal, the desert was about to give something back. March in southern Texas. Then the storm came. A true Coahuilan sandstorm, brutal and unapologetic, sweeping across the ridgeline like a tide of angry ghosts. Dust swallowed the world. Canvas tents bowed like cowards. The perimeter of the temporary Marine Corps outpost rattled under nature's assault like a war zone under siege. Sergeant Dan Williams didn't flinch. At 35, Dan was carved from war and weariness. His pale green eyes carried the kind of silence that only came from witnessing too much. A half-healed scar curled under chin, a parting gift from Fallujah. Dan was the kind of man who didn't speak unless there was something worth saying. It was supposed to be a routine night watch. Just him, bitter coffee, and the wind hammering through sandbags like artillery fire. But then something cracked the monotony. A sound too organic to be debris, too persistent to be wind, too desperate to ignore. A whimper. Dan Williams wasn't supposed to leave his post. Marines follow orders. Period. Protocol is written in blood and carved in stone. But that sound, that broken, desperate whimper cutting through 65-mile-per-hour winds, it wasn't debris. It wasn't the storm playing tricks. It was a cry for help. And Dan Williams had never been able to ignore those. Dan stepped off the observation post and moved into the storm. His figure disappeared into dust as if swallowed by the very earth. Visibility dropped to 5 feet. Every step forward was blind faith. The wind tried to push him back, tried to bury him alive in flying sand. The whimper grew louder. Crying? Soft and broken. Dan pressed forward until the world sharpened for a moment, just long enough to show him the impossible. What he found defied every law of survival. Huddled against a jagged stone outcrop lay a German shepherd. Her coat was matted with blood and dust, ribs visible under thick fur. She was trembling, her eyes wide and alert despite her condition, fixed on Dan with a mix of fear and defiance that spoke of a warrior's heart. But she wasn't alone. Pressed beneath her dying body were 3 tiny puppies, barely moving, their bodies curled tight into her chest for warmth and protection. One whined, weakly, another barely lifted its head. The third lay still as death. No collar, no tracks, no explanation for how they survived in a wasteland that kills everything it touches. They should have been dead hours ago, but somehow, impossibly, they were clinging to life. Dan crouched slowly. "Easy, girl," he murmured. The shepherd growled low, but didn't move. Her eyes never left his. Dan knew that look. It was trust, just barely clinging to instinct. It was a mother's last desperate hope. Deep lacerations along her haunch, still bleeding. An infected gash near the shoulder. The pups, one black like a shadow, one tan and speckled, and one golden cream with a torn ear that spoke of violence, survived. They were minutes from death. Maybe less. Dan had lost everything in war. His best friend, Buddy, a military K-9 who died saving his life. His faith in anything good lasting. His ability to feel anything beyond duty and exhaustion. but looking into that mother's eyes, eyes that held fierce love even as death circled, something cracked open inside him. Something he thought had died in the desert years ago. He broke protocol. He risked his career. He risked everything. Without a word, Dan gathered them all, mother and puppies, into his coat, shielding them from the storm. The mother whined, but didn't fight him. The storm howled around them as Dan pushed forward, step by agonizing step, until the lights of the outpost reappeared through the blur. No one saw him return. Dan ducked into his tent and gently lowered the dogs onto spare blankets. What happened next wasn't just rescue. It was resurrection, not just for 4 abandoned souls, but for a soldier who thought his heart had died in the desert years ago. The puppies cried out softly, but the mother licked each one with tired urgency. Dan poured water into an empty meal tray. The mother lapped it up with a shaking tongue, her eyes never leaving his face. "I'm calling you Athena," he said finally. The name fit, weather-worn, strong, still standing against impossible odds. Athena responded with a quiet breath, her tail thudding weakly against the tarp. For the first time in years, Dan Williams smiled. Days turned into a careful routine. Dan mixed rations with water, cleaned wounds with precious medical supplies, slept on his rucksack so the dogs could have his sleeping bag. Every morning, he checked to make sure they were all still breathing. But secrets don't stay buried in the desert. Private Michael Berg discovered them first. When he saw the dogs, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "You know Captain Richards will throw a fit?" "I'll deal with Richards." The conspiracy grew. Corporal Stacy McBride, the unit medic, was next. When she saw Athena and the puppies, her whole demeanor shifted. "She's dehydrated and that back leg's infected. You'll need antibiotics." "I can help," Stacy said. "I don't trust many people, Williams, but I trust dogs." Athena fought infection and starvation with warrior determination. The puppies, Dan named them Bingo, Scooter, and Bella, grew stronger each day. Other Marines began to notice. Someone left a tennis ball. Another donated his blanket. Even the hardest soldiers found themselves sneaking scraps to the growing puppies. Scooter learned to respond to Dan's whistle. Bingo appointed himself protector of his siblings. Bella seemed to sense which Marines needed comfort most, appearing beside the loneliest soldiers during their darkest moments. And Athena? Athena became the mother they all needed, patient, protective, unconditionally loving. But all secrets have expiration dates. Captain Elliot Richards discovered them on a Tuesday morning. Short but powerfully built, with close-cropped silver hair and a jaw that looked like it had never relaxed. "Williams, step out. Now. I've received reports that you're harboring animals inside a government facility." "Tell me that's not true, Sergeant. They were dying in the storm. I brought them in. That's the truth. That's a violation of Regulation 4002C, unauthorized presence of live animals in an operational zone." Richards's voice cut like a blade. "You have 48 hours. After that, they're handed over to animal control. No exceptions. Clear?" Dan gave a single nod. "Clear." But something extraordinary was already in motion. That evening, as word spread through the base like wildfire, every Marine gathered in the mess tent. They talked about the dogs who had somehow brought light to their corner of hell. Berg stood up first. "I'm not letting them go to some shelter where they'll be put down." Stacy nodded. "Those dogs saved something in all of us. Now it's our turn." By midnight, they had a plan. By dawn, they had a petition signed by every active Marine on base. The request was simple but revolutionary. Designate the storage container as a temporary rehabilitation unit for Athena and her pups, under supervision of Dan and Stacy, with weekly veterinary visits. When Captain Richards found the petition on his desk, he fumed like a volcano. But with morale delicate and command watching, he had little choice. He signed the approval, stamping it with loud frustration. The storage container became more than sanctuary. It became a symbol. Someone painted Unit K9F, Athena's Den, on the side. A chewed tennis ball appeared on a spike like a flag of hope. And then Fiona arrived. Fiona Reed was 36, tall with chestnut hair and intelligent eyes, warmer than Dan remembered. Once, long ago, she had been everything Dan wanted before war made him forget how to want. "I heard you found a shepherd," she said, smiling faintly. "Berg called in a favor." Dan looked down at Athena. "She's not just a stray." "I know. And I didn't come to take her. I came to help you keep her." Under Fiona's expert care, the transformation accelerated. Athena's wounds healed. The puppies grew robust and playful. Scooter learned to fetch with boundless enthusiasm. Bingo mastered intimidating visitors with his deep bark. Bella became the unofficial therapy dog for the entire unit. But more than that, they had awakened something in every Marine who encountered them. They remembered what they were fighting for beyond duty. They remembered that love was stronger than protocol, that compassion was braver than following orders. The dogs didn't just survive, they thrived. They transformed hardened warriors into men who remembered how to be gentle. They turned a military outpost into something it was never meant to be, a home where love conquered regulation. What started as a rescue mission became a resurrection story, not just for 4 abandoned souls, but for every Marine who witnessed the miracle. They saw how one act of compassion could ripple through an entire unit, changing hearts that had forgotten how to hope. The base became different. Laughter returned to the mess tent. Marines lingered after duty to play with the puppies. Even the most battle-hardened soldiers found themselves smiling when Scooter would steal their bootlaces or when Bella would curl up beside them during the hardest nights. Months later, when Dean's deployment ended, he faced a choice: leave them behind or take them home. There was no choice at all. Dan adopted all 4 dogs officially. They traveled together to his retirement home in New Mexico, where Fiona joined them as his wife. Athena lived to be 14, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. The puppies became therapy and rescue dogs, touching countless lives with the same miracle they had brought to that desert outpost. This isn't just a story about a Marine who saved some dogs. This is proof that miracles don't always announce themselves with thunder and lightning. Sometimes they arrive on 4 paws in the middle of a storm when we need them most. God doesn't abandon us in our darkest moments. He sends us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. Sometimes it's an angel, sometimes it's a friend, and sometimes, just sometimes, it's a dying mother dog who teaches us that love is the only force stronger than death. Sergeant Dan Williams thought he was saving Athena and her puppies, but the truth is, they saved him. They saved an entire unit of Marines who remembered what they were really fighting for. The desert had tried to erase them. War had tried to break them. Regulations had tried to separate them. But love, fierce, protective, unconditional love, had other plans. Their greatest miracle wasn't their survival. It was their ability to remind a group of hardened warriors that tenderness isn't weakness, it's the strongest force in the universe. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that miracles are real and love conquers all, share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this miracle travels. And if you believe that God places the right souls in our path at exactly the right moment, type miracle in the comments below, because sometimes the greatest rescues happen when we think we're doing the rescuing. Sometimes, in the middle of our darkest storms, salvation comes on 4 paws and reminds us that we were never truly alone. Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that prove love is the greatest force in the universe. God bless you. And may you always be ready to recognize the miracles hiding in your storms. Before you leave, here's another heartwarming video to watch.